Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome back to Characters Explained, a series where I cover characters from the game Battle for Neighborville. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a second look at one of BFN's only elemental characters, that being Snapdragon. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So Snapdragon has a rather interesting background in this franchise, but not for the reasons that you might think. He started out in PVZ 2, working as a sort of close-range plant that deals damage in a 2x3 radius. He would later on appear in other games as a basic plant, but in the shooter games, he was actually first a potted plant. Yeah, he wasn't an actual character until BFN. So with that being said, why don't we take a look at his BFN iteration. Snapdragon has 175 HP, making him one of the tankier characters on the plant side. He has two primaries, with the main one being called the Flame Blower. This attack deals 6.5 damage per hit, and it can be active for a few seconds before the overheat kicks in. The rate of fire for this primary is 525. As for his other primary, this one is called the Flare Ball, which deals 31 damage normally, with 10 being the splash. You can shoot up to 9 shots consecutively before needing to cool down, and the rate of fire for this attack is 85. Both attacks are seemingly alright so far, but we haven't actually covered Snapdragon's true gimmick yet, which is his fire damage. So Snapdragon actually deals fire damage in this game, and this damage is pretty deadly too. If an enemy is hit with enough fire damage, they can start burning, and this burn deals 18 damage over a course of 1.5 seconds. Now, this fire damage can't lower an enemy down to 0 HP, it can only go down to 15, but still, that is really good. Fire damage in this game is pretty crazy, even if it isn't the assist master beast that it was before. Oh, and one more thing about Snap before we move on is that he can hover in the air if he holds the jump button down. Nothing too crazy here, but it's still worth mentioning. Alright, so that is Snapdragon's basic stats. Now we'll move on to his abilities, starting with Swoop Slam. This ability is quite neat. When activated, Snapdragon launches himself in the air, then crashes down on whatever is in front of him. The damage he deals in particular is 150 directly, with 50 being the splash. It's overall a pretty neat ability, and it can also be used for some movement too. Next up is Blue Blazes, which works very similarly to Super Brain's Rux ability from Garden Warfare 2. For those unfamiliar with how it works, this ability makes Snapdragon launch a large blue fireball from his mouth that can track and follow enemies. Once it hits an enemy, it'll deal 100 damage directly, with 35 being the splash. Now this ability is decent when it works, but it's a homing attack. And as a lot of us know, homing in BFN isn't exactly the best, so it's a bit rough to use sometimes, but otherwise, it's a solid ability. Finally, we have Blazing Trail, which makes Snapdragon spew out a column of flames in front of him. These flames deal 5 damage every 0.23 seconds, with there being a 25 damage hit thrown in every once in a while too. This lasts for quite a while too, so it's a really good ability for crowd control, and I would highly recommend using it when possible. So that is Snapdragon's basic kit. Overall, he's actually quite a solid character in this game, even if he's countered pretty heavily by things like Scientist. But with that being said, we still have some upgrades to get to, so let's cover those next. So Snapdragon's upgrades are a pretty unique bunch. It's not because they're overpowered or anything, but more so because they're so bland? Yeah, can't lie, Snapdragon has some boring upgrades. But we're gonna discuss them all anyways, so let's get into it. First up are his base upgrades, and starting off here is Excellent Accelerant. And wow, what an upgrade to start with! This upgrade buffs the burning duration of his fire, going from 1.5 seconds to 4. You know what that means? His total burn damage just went from 18 to 45. Holy frick. Now that's fire damage right there. It's funny how this is the first upgrade I covered because this is arguably his best one, but yeah, overall this upgrade is great. Highly recommend using it. Next up is Coolant, which reduces your primary's overheat whenever you ignite an enemy. This upgrade is super simple, but it's also a really good one too, so overall check it out if you feel like you need some more time to kill enemies. Radiates is our next upgrade here, and it increases the size of Flare Ball, with it now being 120% bigger. It might seem like a minuscule change, but what this really means is that Snap can now basically deal guaranteed splash damage if he hits his balls anywhere near the enemy's feet. This can actually be pretty useful, so I'd recommend trying it out. Finally, for our normal upgrades is Campfire, which makes it so that any enemy vanquished by Snapdragon has a column of fire spawn on their bodies for a few seconds. Now here's the thing about this column. It isn't the same as Blazing Trail's columns. This will only do the 5 damage, and it sticks around for less time too. But still, it's a decent upgrade for what it's worth, so it's worth giving a shot. Now we'll move on to his ability upgrades, starting with the Swoop Slam ones. Quake is first, and it makes Swoop Slam launch enemies in the air whenever you hit them or get near them. It's actually pretty crazy, but it's also really chaotic, so I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Regardless, it's a neat upgrade. The other one here is Snap's most expensive upgrade, that being Incendiary. This upgrade does a couple of things. First of all, any Vanquish that Snap gets reduces the cooldown on Swoop Slam by a few seconds. On top of this, Swoop Slam now also ignites enemies. This is a good upgrade, but I'll admit that for the price range, it doesn't really offer a whole lot. Still good, but I think there's better choices. Up next are the Blue Blazes upgrades, starting with Heat Seeking. And this does exactly what you think it does. It increases the detection range for the ability. And that's all she wrote. Pretty boring upgrade, all things considered, but it does help out, so whatever. The other upgrade is Ventilation, which is like Incendiary in the sense that it also does a couple of things. First off, when Blue Blazes is used, no matter how full the cooldown bar is for your primaries, it gets reset completely, and on top of this, using the ability reduces the cooldown for both of your other abilities by 12 seconds over 8 seconds whenever it's activated. So yeah, pretty good overall. Finally, we have the Blazing Trail upgrades, and these are rough. Engulf is first, and this upgrade increases the duration of Blazing Trail. So this can both be one of the best upgrades for Snap, while also being one of the worst, if not the worst. It's a risky gamble, and frankly, it has no place being risky to begin with, because it's supposed to be an upgrade. So we're moving on. Finally, we have Backdraft, which makes Blazing Trail come out faster. Yeah, Snap wasn't blessed in the Blazing Trail department. So that is all of Snapdragon's upgrades. He's got a very interesting bunch, but with that being said, I think we've got enough material to work with here to make some example builds, so let's get into it. First up is my personal build using Ventilation, Excellent Accelerant, and Radiate. It's a simple build, but it works well enough to where I can inflict some serious burns on enemies I see, so it works out well. Next up is a crowd control build using Campfire, Combo, and Coolant. Again, nothing too crazy here, but it's good. Finally, we have a build I like to call the Midnight Swooper. This build only has Incendiary and Ventilation, but if you know what those two upgrades are good for, then you know exactly what this build strives for. Destruction, chaos, and ashes will remain in your wake, or you'll fumble and get vanquished. Your choice. So with all of that out of the way, that is Snapdragon roughly explained. And now, I'd like to give my own personal thoughts on the character. And he's alright. I think out of every character in BFN, Snap is arguably my least played, which is insane to think about, but it's for a good reason. Despite his unique fire effect, he's honestly not too interesting of a character, at least to me. There's days where I'll genuinely forget what half of his upgrades are, and I don't really do that with anybody else in the cast except him. So yeah, if you want my brutal honesty, that's my answer. Forgettable, but alright. And with that being said, I think I'll be ending this video here. Thank you all so much for watching until the end, I really do appreciate it. And let me know, do you like Snapdragon and BFN? Or do you think he's mid? Well, tell me your thoughts and more in the comments down below. And if you're new around here, and you like what you saw, then maybe consider subscribing too. It helps me out a ton, and I'd really appreciate it. Now as for me, I'm gonna go ahead and cause some chaos with Swoop Slam, so I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.